Welcome everyone to the March 12th, 2026 meeting of the Interneighborhood Cooperation Transportation Committee. Tonight we've got four topics, starting with Nathan Pope from Denver Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, who's going to tell us about Denver bike and scooter share, which is going through a big change. They've selected one new vendor to replace the two previous vendors in an RFP process. Then we'll turn to Jill Locantore, the Executive Director of the Denver Streets Partnership. She's going to talk about a grade card that came out from a number of advocacy organizations recently, uh, evaluating the first 2 years of Mayor Johnston's term through the lens of his own promises as a candidate. And then we'll turn to Pete Piccolo from Bicycle Colorado, and he'll talk about a major study they just did that's really fascinating using technology to watch driver behavior. And it's maybe the first study of its kind that I'm familiar with, certainly in Colorado, and that'll be very, very interesting. And then staying with the technology trend, but moving it to the neighborhood level. We'll have Josh Pauletic. He's here in my neighborhood, and he's found a piece of technology that lets him add data to things he's been advocating for in the neighborhood by having a consumer grade camera based system watch traffic, give counts, give speeds, and add that kind of real information to what we all experience when advocating for change in neighborhoods. But first, we'll start with Nathan Pope. I'll stop sharing and invite you to start.
Thank you, Joel. So good to be here. Really appreciate folks' time. If we haven't met before, my name is Nathan Pope. I'm a planner with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. And if I share my screen correctly here, we're going to talk tonight about the shared bike and scooter program and the procurement process that we are in the middle of and are wrapping up to select the future of that program. Joel, can you give me a thumbs up if we're looking okay? Awesome. We'll jump right in. I like to start with why shared bikes and scooters matter. And when I say shared bikes and scooters, sometimes we call that micro mobility. That's a little wonky for my taste. So sticking with shared bikes and scooters. And why they matter here in Denver, it's really been a reliable and sustainable transportation option for many folks here in the city. They're electric vehicles. We see them really replacing car trips, doing that mode shift to give people choices to get out of their car and try a different way of getting around. And we estimate that we're reducing 10 to 15,000 car trips, 10 to 15,000 car trips every day. In the summer months, we can get close to 40,000 shared bike and scooter trips in a single day. So it's a program that has really grown, has become quite popular. It's really an affordable and equitable mobility tool as well. Our Access program provides free trips to income qualified folks here in Denver, and we believe it's the largest program of its type anywhere in the world. And these are not just fun trips; these are integral parts of our transportation system. We see folks who ride regularly going to work, going to healthcare, and really connecting to transit and making some of those really critical trips that are part of everyday life. And they're using shared bike and scooters to do that. So that's why we think it's important and why we're talking about it today. See if I can advance my slide here. There we go. A little bit more context for you. The Shared Bike and Scooter program has its evolution in Denver B-Cycle. I'm sure folks who've been around a little while remember B-Cycle operated for about 9-10 years, was a single operator, and they did about 4.4 million annual trips a year, 400,000 trips per year. Right in about 2019, 2018, dockless scooters came to town, and the city put together a pilot program. That was a 2-year program, 2019 to 2021. There were 7 different operators. Some folks may remember this time as a rainbow of different scooters out there. We learned a lot. There's about 2.2 million annual trips there. And from that, we took all the lessons learned and put that together into a competitive procurement process to select the next phase of the program. We released a request for proposals and selected 2 operators from that. And we have license agreements with them that are 5 years starting in 2021 and ending in 2026. So you can get an idea for maybe why we're talking about this now. Those agreements end in May of 2026. Those are with Lime and now Bird. And we do 6.6 million annual trips last year on that program, and that's been pretty consistent. So you can also see the growth of the program from less than 1 million to 6.6 million trips here over the past couple of years. So really what we're about to talk about today is the end of the Lime and Bird license agreements here in May and what comes next. Been doing a lot of listening to folks, hearing folks, what's working, what's not working, talking to local stakeholders, community groups, RNOs. We did a big survey a year or so ago, asking folks what was working for them, really focusing on the riders, but also on folks who don't ride as well. And we have about 2,500 responses to that survey. Also working with a lot of our regional partners to see what's going on in their communities and peer cities as well, Seattle, New York, Portland, DC, to understand what they're experiencing with this same type of programs, and seeing if we can steal any best practices from them. Talking to the operators as well, this landscape has changed quite a bit over the past couple of years, and so learning from them what's possible, where the technology's at, what they see as best practice. We also worked with council last year in 2025 on some new legislation. This was championed by Councilmember Hines, Watson, and Parity, around sidewalk riding detection, mandatory parking zones, and some other items. And so working closely with council over last year on that legislation and really tying it to this process at the end of the contracts for Lyman Bird and the start of the next process. I have down there are kind of the priorities that came out of all this work around safety and vision zero, equity and access, affordability and mode shift, as well as parking in the public realm. And those were really what we took into this procurement process. Procurement being the way that cities select vendors for different types of programs. So that's what we did beforehand. And then we put together a request for proposals, an RFP, took those priorities and baked them into those requirements, and issued this request for proposals where any company that operates shared bikes and scooters can propose how they're going to meet Denver's needs. We had a 4-month multi-phase process at the end of last year. We had a selection committee of city experts from our curbside and parking team, our Office of Community and Business Engagement, from our Department of Finance, to help evaluate these proposals. And we really focused on experience and past performance. The process included written proposals, in-person device demonstrations, in-person interviews, financial reviews, reference checks, and I pulled some of the scoring criteria you can see from there through that process. It was really a rigorous process. We got to learn a lot about these companies and the state of the industry, and really happy with the robustness of it. So from that, we selected VO as the single operator for the program moving forward. I think people's first question is who's VO? I've never heard of them before, and I think that's they're just not quite here in Denver, but they're a U.S.-based company, women and minority-owned. They operate in 50 cities across the U.S., including some of the largest cities like L.A., New York, D.C. They're a little bit more deliberate with their growth, is maybe how I'll put it, compared to some of the other companies. They're, we kind of treat them like the tortoise and the hare metaphor. They're slow and deliberate with their growth, and they're financially stable because of that. They were the strongest performance across all of our procurement evaluation criteria, and I'll get into the details for all the different things that VO is going to bring to the table. But I'll kind of pause here for a minute. That's kind of the process for how we got here. We went through that competitive procurement process, selected VO, and announced that towards the end of last year. And now we're going to be talking about what's VO bringing, what are we writing into this new contract that we're going to have with them. So in the contract with VO, we're going to have cheaper prices, more ways to ride, flexible equity programs, and increased accountability. Starting with the cheaper prices, I think we heard loud and clear from folks who do ride that the price was certainly something that deterred them from riding more. That's what we learned from our survey, and so price was something we wanted to look into. The VO base rate is actually going to be cheaper than the rates that we have today. They've been slowly creeping up from 40 cents a minute, 42 cents a minute. Now we're at 44 cents per minute with a $1 unlock. And a 10-minute ride, you can see in that chart here, is kind of the average ride for folks is about $5.40 today. With the new VO rate, it'll be 39 cents per minute, and you'll get about 10% off. And they're also going to be required to offer a Denver resident pass. So if you show them something with your address on it, you'll be able to have that Denver resident pass, and you'll be able to have 35% savings there. So $1 to unlock 25 cents per minute. That $5.40 ride now comes down to $3.50, almost $2 savings. I think that we're taking the next step here, and we're not just trusting that they're going to keep those prices. We're writing them into the contract that we have with the contract with VO, and so those rates will be locked in at this level. More ways to ride. That's something else that VO is going to be bringing to the table. I think this is going to be a pretty visible change for folks. VO's something that really makes them stand out is their fleet diversity, right? They have a bunch of different types of vehicles, not just standing scooters, but seated scooters, two-seated scooters, cargo vehicles, and even the world's first shared trike. This is really important to us because it's going to make it more comfortable for different types of people to take more types of trips and use this program. They're practical for longer trips, and they have room for carrying belongings, groceries, suitcase, anything like that. It's much easier to use one of these devices than the current fleet. We're also excited because VO builds all of their devices in-house. They're not, purchased off the shelf and then retrofitted for the shared market. They are built with the riders in mind for a shared market. We're also really focused on getting larger wheels. So right now, about 80% of the fleet is those standing scooters with the smaller wheels. Moving forward, we're going to reduce that from 70 down to 30%, 33% or so. And so the vast majority of the fleet will have those larger wheels that's more comfortable, easier to balance on, and can take potholes a little bit better, and maybe are a bit more intuitive to ride in the bike lane and not on the sidewalk. So really changing that mix of the fleet to make it more appealing to different types of people and for more different types of trips. Really excited about the trike in particular. If folks have balance challenges, they're specifically designed for that. Folks with disabilities and a big cargo capacity in the back, you could fit your week's worth of groceries in there, no problem. We're starting since we're going to be the first market from this, we're going to start pretty small and keep a close eye on it. But really excited to have that here in Denver. All these devices are packed with technology. They have sidewalk riding detection that uses a form of radar and erratic riding detection. If folks are swerving or hard braking repeatedly, we'll get a better understanding of that. And then there's real time. I think a place that VO stands out as well is that all these devices can talk to the rider in real time and say, hey, it looks like you're riding on the sidewalk. Don't do that. Hey, it looks like you're swerving a lot. Don't do that. And so really trying to educate riders in real time. The equity programs is something we're really proud of here at the city. The current program offers free rides for income qualified folks, and we want to continue that. That's called the Access Program for income qualified Denverites. The eligibility is more or less is going to be the same: SNAP, Medicaid, RTD Live. Basically anyone under 200% of the federal poverty level can ride for free. The change here is moving from 3 free trips per day to 60 minutes of free ride time per day, with the idea that this is more flexible for folks. You can take 2 30-minute trips today, or you can take 6 10-minute trips tomorrow, depending on your schedule and your needs. It's a program that has been very successful, and we're excited to have this extra level of flexibility for folks to continue to use that program. Also continuing the geographic equity requirements, which require the fleet to be distributed to different parts of the city where it may not otherwise be required. 30% today has to be in these equity-focused neighborhoods, and anybody who starts a ride in those neighborhoods, regardless of if you have you're part of the access program, you'll be getting a significant discount to start those rides. And then for folks who don't have smartphones or bank accounts, there'll be ways to unlock and ride without needing that. Increased accountability, that's something we heard loud and clear as folks want more of. I think the place to start is VO is going to be able to do all of this with local in-house W-2 employees. The industry today, including our operators in Denver, relies very heavily on contractors and subcontractors, gig workers, to rebalance the fleet, charge batteries, move things around during the day. And VO is able to do that with W-2 employees. So a lot of local hiring, living wages, professional development opportunities, and really helps specialize and show more accountability in the workforce. It's VO branded uniforms with VO branded vans for folks out in the street. They're also able to customize and have the same person in the same neighborhoods every day. That's their zone. They get to know it a lot better. They know where the problem areas are, and they're there every day, and so they can keep a better understanding of the neighborhood. I think there's going to have a lot of good secondary benefits to having these new W-2 employees managing the program or balancing the program, and so really excited to have that change here and a place where VO stood out. Around parking as well, we're moving towards more of this hybrid system. We're kind of going back to B-cycle with docks, where we're going to have mandatory parking zones where riders are ending their trips in the parking corral for our highest ridership areas, starting with downtown. VIO is going to be building 150 new parking corrals on top of the almost 300 that we have today. And those parking corrals will be built to not only have room for the shared vehicles, but also personal devices too, where we can have some U-racks. You may have seen a couple of those where we have the box for shared vehicles and then the U-rack for personal vehicles as well. There's a lot of technology that VIO uses as well to in areas where there's not mandatory parking zones to make sure that parking behavior doesn't block access, especially ADA access. There's a real-time parking coach that doesn't let folks end their trip until they're able to scan it and prove that it's not blocking any access. So we're excited to continue to implement that. So, this is a kind of the quick hits here for you all. Cheaper prices, more ways to ride, flexible equity program, and increased accountability. And I'll look to you, Joel. It's 6:17. How much more time do I have on the agenda? I meant to ask that.
You take about 5 more minutes, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Perfect. So we're baking this all into a license agreement. That's the contract type that we have, a 3 years license agreement. We have an annual fee that we're going to be getting for the first time as well, and additional requirements around market transition, data handoff requirements, so that when VIO leaves the market, we have a really smooth transition there. I bring that up because I think there's folks have raised questions about moving from two down to one single operator, and I think those are very valid questions. I think the place to start is our current system is very unbalanced. I think the ideal situation is you have two operators and they're each have 55% of the market and they're pushing each other to do better. We just really haven't seen that. There's not any examples of this like competition improving outcomes. It's really an 85 15% split that has been like that for several years, and that's the case for all of our peer cities as well. And really, it's this market share pressure where they're trying to keep your ride. They want Nathan to ride with them again. And so if I don't do a good job of parking, they don't want to discourage me from riding in the future because they're scared I'll go to the competitor. So it's really this downward pressure instead of an opportunity to create competition. By going with a single operator, we're able to maximize the value that we're getting to the city. That's how we're able to get these lower prices, these better devices, these higher service standards, that W-2 workforce, because the operator sees more value in a market with a single operator. And it gives the riders all the options within a single experience, within a single app. You don't have to juggle between two. Same for folks who don't ride. I'm sure folks have all reported a misparked device. You have to figure out, okay, whose is it? Is it a Lime? Is it a Bird? Okay, who do I contact? You can always go to 311, but in this case, you can always just go directly to VIO, and they'll be make it easier for reporting devices. It's also going to reduce over deployment. We do see in our highest ridership areas that, for example, they know that in my intersection, there's going to be 10 riders today. So company A puts 10 devices, company B puts 11 devices to try to capture that market share. By having a single operator, they'll just be able to put 10 devices there, and those other 10 can be spread more equitably across the city. And really creates a system focused on outcomes, not fighting over market share. And we're locking all of these things into the contract so that they can be accountable for them. So Bird and Lime's agreements end in mid-May. We're going to start VIO off on May 1st. So we'll have little over 2 weeks of transition time to ramp VIO up and wind down Bird and Lime. The access program is our top priority. Folks in that income qualified program, that's our top priority to make sure they have a smooth transition from Lime or Bird access over to VIO access. They are out in the streets today. VIO is talking to folks, going to community events, getting people pre-signed up for VIO access. They're calling it early access, online or via phone. They're at a bunch of community events. They're also allowing folks who are already part of Bird or Lime access to show that as proof of eligibility. So if you're already part of Bird or Lime access, you don't have to go and find your SNAP or your Medicaid or anything like that. You can just say, hey, I was part of Lime access, and then you're eligible for VIO access. Say you go through, we get to May and folks haven't transitioned yet. Folks will still be able there's not going to be any gaps in service for folks. They'll be able to find a VIO vehicle, scan it, and then self-confirm, self-verify their eligibility and say, yep, I'm part of the access program without showing any documentation, just by hitting a single button, and they'll be able to ride on the spot. We will ask them within a week or two to go back and verify and send that documentation of their eligibility, but you really don't want anyone to have any gaps of service because folks are using these for essential trips. So that's the instant access. And there's going to be a big campaign, outreach campaign to make sure folks hear about this change, English, Spanish, multilingual, other languages as well, coming up here once we get through the council process. If folks want to stay up to date, I think the best place to go is vioride.com. That's where there's more about the pricing programs, more about VIO. There's focus groups and community opportunities, and they're hiring a lot of folks right now as well. Especially folks who are contractors for Lyman Bird. This is a great opportunity for them to continue in those mechanics, technicians, supervisor roles. And I'll drop that link in the chat. We're going to council next week, so this is a very timely presentation. March 18th will be at the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and then the full City Council reading is on the 31st at the end of the month, before VO would launch on May 1st. I think that's all I got. I'm really happy to answer questions. Here's kind of the summary slide, but I'm really excited to have a conversation and hear what folks' questions or comments are.
Thank you very much. We had a question I think you've already answered from Allison, so we'll move to Thomas. Thomas has a question about the financing or the financials. Thomas.
All right, so I really appreciate that all the thoroughness that you guys are doing. One of the concerns that I have is in trying to keep the cost down for us, sometimes that limits the ability for a company to create enough revenue later down the line of the contract. And a lot of times that results in quality or service reductions. And so I'm curious how the contract ensures that the company is going to be able to keep going with what they start out with, even though the reductions are, or the prices are going to stay. And I don't know what the number is, but yeah.
Yeah, no, great question. How do we know that VO just didn't give us a really good offer and is not going to be able to deliver on it, especially with some of these requirements on there? How do we know their business model is sound? So we had our Department of Finance was part of the selection committee, and we had them look at some of VO's numbers and books to really understand their business model and make sure it maps out. Additionally, I do have a slide on this. We have a service level agreement that's part of the contract that lists out, about 15 different service metrics and has how we measure them, what their requirements are, and what the penalties are. And so that's a service level agreement that we have with clear escalating penalties. If VO doesn't deliver, we do have the option to bring in a second operator to have that competition come back in. That's something that we are writing in the contract to make sure we have the ability to do. We're a very popular market, and so I don't think it would be very hard at all to add another operator in if VO's not able to deliver on their promises. But overall, we looked at VO's books and are confident in their ability to deliver on this. A big part of that is moving to a single operator where the market share conversation isn't they're able to model out the whole year, the whole 3 years of the contract and make commitments based on that whole time frame, knowing exactly what share of the market they have.
Next, Bill Hare would like to go a little deeper on the selection process. Bill?
Yeah, what you just mentioned about the fact that you have the option of bringing somebody else in if VO is not functioning well lessens my concern here. But I was partially just interested in whether or not they were selected because they were clearly any better than any of their competition, or was it more because you only wanted one company in the program?
Yeah, so we had a whole bunch of criteria and questions that were released as part of our RFP, our request for proposals. Part of that was being very clear that we're going to select up to 2 operators. That's the same language we used in the previous one. But we asked everyone to propose as if they were the single operator and then tell us what they would have to change if they were to share the market. So we were able to compare apples to apples, single operator to single operator, and if folks had to share the market. VO, we had all of these categories here, and VO scored the best across all of the different criterias, and so they were selected. I think it's probably as simple as that. They were able to have the highest, the best evaluation criteria across multiple categories. I think a place they really stand out is the vehicles. They're able to offer those lower prices, and the W-2 workforce, if I have to rattle off on the top of my head where some of the differentiators for them. But overall, it was across all of these categories.
David has a question about some transition issues. David.
Yeah, Nathan, we've had reports that Lime has a pop-up now that encourages a person to, when they start a ride, to contact the city council members to say, "Hey, we want two providers, not one." Is this a situation DOTI's monitoring, and especially considering the current contracts that Lime has with the city? Is this a violation of any of their current uh, of their current contract?
Yeah, I got the push notification on my phone and on the Lime app telling me to contact City Council to keep Lime in Denver. Um, I think Lime and Bird are disappointed with the results, and fair enough, of the procurement, but they had the same opportunities as everyone else to respond to our procurement. I don't think they're in violation of anything. I think we're um, hoping that they'll be good partners in this transition. They have been good partners, and we hope they continue to be good partners by helping us with the transition, especially around the equity and the access programs, and letting folks know. I'm happy to know that have the ability and confirm that they have the ability to target Denver and share information about the program, and we hope that they'll use that to tell folks about this transition here shortly. But yeah, this is a very common strategy in the industry. This is not the first time that this has happened before, where an incumbent is not successful, and they do what they can to influence the outcome. And so I think we were not surprised that that's happening, but just want to make it clear for folks that even though Lime and Bird's contracts may be ending, that does not mean that Shared Bikes and Scooters service is ending. That this will continue just with a new operator.
Thanks. Allison's back. She has a question about the bike format.
I see it in there. I can tackle that one.
Okay.
Oops, sorry.
The
My microphone wasn't by my mouth. So it looks like obviously, the standing electric scooter is going to be, and the sitting scooters are scooters, so they're just throttled. But are the bicycles, are they pedal assist at all?
the bikes are pedal assist and throttle, so you have the option of either. I think we had a really interesting. Uh, Lime had their bikes that were pedal assist only, and then they retrofitted those to have throttles on them in the past, like a year ago, year and a half ago. And we actually saw a big increase in how folks who are using the bikes. It's made it more folks like those more. So I think this is the good data to show that this is the right direction for us. That folks can have the option to pedal, or they can have the option of using the throttle, depending on what they prefer.
Right. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Hearing from folks who were at a recent event where these were demoed, that one of the interesting things about the bikes is that the seat is not adjustable, so you don't adjust it for your height. Instead, you just sort of slide back further if you have longer legs. How does that seem to you?
I think the fewer moving parts we can have on the shared devices, the better, because it's just things that, these take a beating out there sitting, out there being used all day. And so the fewer, seat posts. I don't know if you've ever tried one of our bikes out there today. They're quite difficult to adjust the seat. So um, uh, I think VO takes it very seriously that they're designing these vehicles for people with diverse body types. They have done a whole bunch of studies. They work with the disability community. They work with riders to design these devices. So I'm confident that this is a solution that'll work for most folks.
Okay. And just a question on the equity areas. It's a funny map that you showed. It's not neighborhoods, it's small spots. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that's based on the DOTI Equity Index, which is a collection of different indicators. It's by census block or census tract, excuse me. So there's census tracts in there. I think we're trying to strike the balance between having too fine grain of a unit and too big of a unit as well. And so I think this is a map that will continue to while this map looks pretty granular, I think in practice it'll be a little bit more easier. We'll have a public version that's a little bit easier to use that has some of those borders smoothed out, so you don't cross the street and have a different situation.
Okay. I'm going to try to keep us on time, but we do have a few questions in the chat. If you're able to stay and respond in chat, I know people appreciate that.
Happy to.
But we're going to move to our second topic.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, next we have Jill Locantore, Executive Director of Denver Streets Partnership, to talk about the recent mayoral scorecard and report that came out, published by Denver Streets Partnership and a number of advocacy agencies. And I think this might be the first time I've seen this presented. It was out there, the press picked up on it a little bit, but I never really saw an extended interview. So I'm glad to give this space to Jill.
Thanks, Joel. Let me share my screen here. All right, are you all seeing the slideshow?
I see you hitting the slideshow button. I'm not, oh, it's changing. It's there. Perfect.
Woo! Well, thanks for having us. Now that it's been a little more than 2 years since the mayor has been in office, we had been hearing from a number of different community members some growing frustration with his failure to live up to some of the commitments that he made as a candidate. And so we thought it was a good time to get together with some of our coalition members and actually document what exactly did he say when he was running for office, and then what has actually happened over the last 2 years. Spoiler alert, you can see on this slide, we did not give him a particularly good grade, not failing totally, but a D. And our intention was not only to document where we saw the shortcomings, but to make some very productive recommendations for how his administration could do better. So as Joel mentioned, this was a collaborative effort from a number of different coalition partners. The primary authors, in addition to the Denver Streets Partnership, were Denver Bicycle Lobby, Pedestrian Dignity, and Greater Denver Transit. Each of these orgs were really actively engaged during the mayoral election, communicating with candidates. Both Denver Bicycle Lobby and Denver Streets Partnership did candidate questionnaires when folks were running for office. And so that's a lot of the material that we drew upon to compare what did he say versus what has he actually done. But as I mentioned, there was a pretty widespread grumbling amongst the community about his performance. And so you can see there are a number of different organizations that signed on to the final grade report card and the recommendations for improvement. It is a 7-page report card, and it goes into pretty in-depth detail on exactly what the mayor said and really looking in detail at what has happened. So I would encourage you to visit the link on the slide here to read the full report card if you're interested. I'm going to hit on the key highlights and what we think are some of the major findings from the report card tonight. So in terms of what he told us as a candidate, he said a lot of things that people who are active in transportation and mobility were very happy to hear at the time. He said he wanted Denver to be a city where you didn't have to have a car in order to get around, that it actually would be possible to live a car-free or a car-light lifestyle as a Denver resident. And he acknowledged that Denver has already created a lot of great plans to improve multimodal transportation, from Denver Moves Everyone to Denver Moves Bikes, Denver Moves Transit. And his intention was not to just keep doing planning, but to focus on actual implementation. He said the biggest problem isn't planning, it's execution on those plans. He talked more specifically about creating a complete, connected, high-comfort bike network across the entire city. He talked about not giving lip service to Vision Zero, but actually making real changes to our streets and our transportation infrastructure to reduce the number of deaths happening on our city streets. And he talked about working with other partners like RTD in order to improve transit with greater reliability and frequency across the system. So all of this sounded great. We were very optimistic at the beginning of his administration. And now 2 years later, things are not looking quite as good as we hoped. One of the most stark statistics is the increase in traffic fatalities, with a record-setting year in 2025 of 93 people killed in preventable traffic crashes, the highest number since Denver first committed to Vision Zero in 2016. It's the highest number I'm aware of in recent history since Denver started tracking. There may have been some higher numbers in years many decades ago, but in terms of the current era, this is really a very high bar now. And it's not a huge mystery why traffic safety is continuing to be a problem on our street. We're seeing under Mayor Johnston's administration that a lot of multimodal and road safety projects are being slowed down. Some of them are being watered down to prioritize driver convenience and parking concerns over safety. And in a few cases, projects are actually being canceled or reversed. Obviously, there's been a huge amount of media coverage around the plans for Alameda Avenue. A lot of us really liked the original plan for a road diet, felt that would go a long ways towards making that street safer. Subsequently, that project was watered down to address concerns about driver convenience. Similarly, plans for a protected bike lane on 29th Avenue ended up getting watered down to accommodate parking concerns on that corridor. In downtown Denver, we had the Blake and Market Street protected bike lanes that many of us were very excited about when they were implemented and felt like they were a long time coming. Those were degraded with some of the actual protections of the bike lanes removed. Primarily because of concerns about aesthetics, which is, an interesting choice to prioritize aesthetics over safety. One of the most stark statistics is the implementation of bike facilities throughout the city. We really started getting some good momentum on building out our bike network under Mayor Hancock. The last few years of his administration, they were building about 46 miles per year of new bike facilities. That has dropped by more than half under the first couple of years of the Johnston administration. That's only 21 miles per year. And it's even more stark when you look at protected bike lanes where there's actually a physical barrier between the bike lane and vehicular traffic. We were at about 12 miles per year protected bike lanes under Hancock, and we're now down to only 5 miles per year under Johnston. Looking across at other modes, transit is another big area of disappointment, aside from the Colfax BRT, which is a project that was well underway when Mayor Johnston came into office. And if anything, he seems interested in slowing down those types of projects. There have been no transit speed or reliability projects implemented so far during the Johnston administration. A bright spot is the sidewalk program actually kicked off this year with concrete being poured, new sidewalks being built, sidewalks being repaired. But I think it's important to remember that is more than 2 years after voters approved the Denver Deserves Sidewalks initiative, and is just another example of how things seems to be moving slower than we would like under this administration. One of the most distressing statistics for me was the elimination or redirecting of funds in the city's annual budget away from transportation safety projects. Most notably, the city has a transportation and mobility special revenue fund, which is a fancy way of saying a dedicated pot of money that was established in 2021 when the city increased parking meter rates. That incremental dollar per hour that we all now pay for parking meters is put into this Transportation and Mobility Special Revenue Fund, and it was explicitly established to fund Vision Zero, bike ped, and transit projects. And for the first several years, it did exactly that. It allocated millions of dollars to building out bike lanes, sidewalks, transit improvements, Vision Zero improvements. But under Mayor Johnston, we've seen that money diverted to other causes that have really nothing to do with safety. In the 2026 budget, there's more than $8 million that have been taken out of that fund to pay for a system for appealing parking tickets. So if you get a parking ticket and you didn't think you deserved it, you can go to the city and you can appeal that. It's important that we fund that, but it's distressing that we're taking that money away from transportation safety projects, which to us feels like a higher priority within the city. So like I said, we wanted to not just point out where we saw the shortcomings, but provide very concrete recommendations for improvement. Number one, that we are really going to be focusing on in the next few months, and hopefully we'll be coming back to you with more information about that, is working actually with City Council to restore the intended purpose of that Transportation and Mobility Special Revenue Fund that was established via an ordinance. And so City Council has the ability to amend that ordinance. We want to make sure that the approximately $15 million per year that goes into that fund is truly used for Vision Zero, Safe Routes to School, pedestrian, bike, and transit projects. We would like to see the administration focus on infrastructure changes and road redesigns on our most dangerous streets. Exactly what he said as a candidate. The high injury network, where 5% of the streets are, but 50% of the traffic fatalities, and moving forward with projects like the originally planned road diet on Alameda, the conversion of general traffic lanes on Federal Boulevard and Colorado Boulevard into dedicated bus lanes. These are exactly the kinds of projects we need to see move forward to start making a dent in our traffic fatality. And more generally, consistently prioritizing safety and people over vehicle delay, which is actually an adopted stated policy of the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, but we've seen them backing away from that prioritization when they're facing political pushback on projects. We want them to continue to fund and expedite the implementation of high comfort bike projects. There's a lot of them that are in the queue that have gone through a great deal of planning and design. And similarly, we want them to fund and expedite transit speed and reliability improvements. Again, there's been a lot of planning done on this in the city around which corridors this should be implemented on. And we would also like to see that incorporated into the planning for Pena Boulevard. So we're not just automatically widening Pena Boulevard and doubling down on car dependency, but actually giving people real viable options for getting to destinations like the airport. So again, you can read the full report card. There's a lot more great details there and additional recommendations at this link. And we invite you to continue to work with us on pushing the mayor and city council and the Department of Transportation to actually act on these recommendations. We had a day of action yesterday specifically for that purpose that included a variety of activities, including a walk and roll along Federal Boulevard and Alameda Boulevard, really highlighting the danger and the lack of dignity experienced by people who travel on those corridors. Kudos to Alejandra, who's here with us tonight, for really helping lead that. We had a die-in at the City and County building, which you can see pictured on the right from the Denver Post coverage. We had 93 people who laid down in front of the City and County building to represent everybody who was killed in a preventable traffic crash last year. Huge thank you to everybody who turned out for that. It was a very powerful and moving experience, I think, for everybody who was there. And then we also identified a variety of ways that individuals who might not have been able to participate in those events could take action. Those are still relevant. You can take those actions today or next week if you want to be part of this call for the city to do better. You can file a 311 street safety report alerting the city to traffic safety issues in your neighborhood. We have a whole guide on our website, both for adults and kids, because we want to engage the whole population in this on how to tips and tricks for submitting those street safety reports. We have a form you can use to send an email to city leaders, calling on them to refocus attention on traffic safety on our streets. And also you can donate to continue to support our ongoing advocacy. In the spirit of the 311 Day of Action, we're suggesting people to donate in multiples that relate to 311, but whatever amount you can contribute helps us continue to do this work going forward. So again, hopefully we'll be coming back to you in the next couple months with additional actions that we're taking and that you can get involved in to push the city to work on these improvements and hopefully get a better grade for the next time we evaluate Mayor Johnston. And that is my last slide. So I'm going to stop sharing and answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I haven't seen questions yet, but please propose them in the chat. I'll start with a couple. Has the mayor's office, the Department of Transportation at a high level reached out to you all since the publication of this report? It's framed in such a great way, like a good teacher saying, "Here's how you can do better." Have they been in touch?
Yes, I have had some informal conversations with both folks at DOTI and in the mayor's office, and the mayor has responded in the media as well. There's been a lot of coverage of the report card in particular, and just general. As I was saying, a lot of people are a little dissatisfied with how DOTI's operating these days, so that's getting a lot of coverage in the media, and he's been responding in that way. We do hope to have an ongoing conversation with him, based on the comments he made as a candidate. This is an issue that he has some interest and understanding of, and so we really would like to be able to talk with him about how he can do better in this particular area.
Great. And I did see, of course, the press coverage. One thing that stood out was among the many things highlighted in your report, it was the rate of building bike lanes, an annual kind of per year rate, and kind of the pushback from the mayor's office in the reporting is, well, we're planning to do this many in the next 2 years. And when you look at it, it was still a very low number. So it's almost as if they didn't understand that the thing they were pushing back, saying, no, no, we're doing this, was in fact lower than the rate we were seeing in the previous administration.
Yes, I would agree with that characterization. The response has not been particularly substantive. And I think that's an example where it really comes back to funding. Both that Transportation and Mobility Special Revenue Fund previously had included millions of dollars for continuing to build out the bike lanes, and has virtually none in the 2026 annual budget, as well as the GO bond. There was a substantial portion of the 2017 GO bond that was dedicated to building out bike infrastructure, and that's how Mayor Hancock was able to get to those higher numbers at the end of his term. But the GO bond that Mayor Johnston asked us to approve just this past fall really includes nothing for bikes, and so it's a matter of putting his money where his mouth is.
Thank you. Any questions from other folks? I know we try to get topics when they're new and fresh. This one had been out in the media for a little while before we were able to invite Jill here, but Allison?
So what made it a D and not an F? Did you want to have room to go lower if it got worse?
We did want to acknowledge things did not completely grind to a halt, that things did actually happen. It's not that we built zero bike lanes. We were still building about 20 miles of bike lanes per year, which is not nothing. And again, the sidewalk program did finally launch this year. I know people in the neighborhoods that got repaired sidewalks were ecstatic about that. So we did want to give him credit for doing something, but acknowledging that it fell well short of what we were expecting.
And if I can take the privilege of another question while I'm unmuted. So has Dottie or the mayor's office said, look, we have this Denver Moves Everyone plan. We know what everyone wants. We have Denver Moves. We have Denver Moves. Has anybody said that? Or are they saying this was 10 years of planning that now we're going to put on a shelf and ignore proudly because it said cars are going to go slower?
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely a change in his communication since he has come into office. As a candidate, we asked him very pointedly in our candidate questionnaire about the fact that Denver spent years developing all of this suite of plans. Denver Moves Pedestrians, Denver Moves Bikes, Denver Moves Transit, Vision Zero Action Plan, Denver Moves Everyone. And probably a lot of folks on this call participated in all those community meetings and surveys and told the city what we wanted, and have been increasingly impatient for the city to deliver on what we told them what we wanted. And so we asked him about that in the candidate questionnaire. And his quote was, Denver has not a planning problem, they have an execution problem. And his job is to focus on execution. But since he's been in office,
I would vote for that guy.
Yeah, we all did, right? But since he's been in office, he's really backed away from the Denver Moves Everyone plan. I don't hear him referencing it very often or quoting some of the key goals or concepts that were put forth in that plan. And so I think partly the onus is on us is to continue to remind him we think it's still relevant and it would be counterproductive to go back to the drawing board with coming up with yet another plan.
Bill has a follow-up question on exactly that. Bill?
Yeah, I don't, I really just want to establish clarity that there is a belief that the planning that's been done is good, that you like the plan, and that really 90% of your concern is implementation.
Yeah, no plan is perfect. There's always things we could find to quibble with in those plans, but I do think Denver is actually very good at planning. And there are some very solid priorities that are established in those plans, maps of the networks that we intend to build out, even cost estimates of what it would take to implement those plans. The devil's often in the details, when you actually come up with the construction drawings, there's more that we need to do to advocate to make sure those projects are really very good. But I absolutely think that we have very strong plans to build on, and it would be counterproductive to throw those out the window.
Thanks.
Thomas has a question. Thomas.
Thank you. So when I met Director Ford when she was doing her parade, when she was coming into the position 2 years ago, and I asked her, and we were talking, and she said, well, the most important thing that you can do is to hold me accountable. And I went away thinking about that. And over the last 2 years, I've kind of been trying to figure out how do we actually do that? Do you have any sense of, now that they've been doing this stuff for 2 years, what does that actually mean? And can we actually hold them accountable?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think participating in things like the 311 Day of Action yesterday is a critical way that we do that. By speaking up, raising our voices, demonstrating a strong and broad showing of support, so that they can't ignore us, right? If you listened to the mayor's comments on CityCast Denver that a lot of people found pretty distressing recently, he noted that only 2% of the population currently rides a bike to work compared to 24% of the population that voted for Trump, with kind of the implied meaning there that, people who care about these transportation issues are such a small portion of the population that they can be easily dismissed. And I think we have to prove to him that that is not true, that the majority of Denverites want better transportation options, want our streets to be safer, want the city to implement these plans that we all provided a huge amount of time and effort providing input on. And the way to do that is to show up and speak out. So, when we have future events like this, taking time out of your day to come in person if you can. If you can't, sending emails, calling your city council members, filing those street safety reports. So we're making enough noise that it's getting harder and harder for Mayor Johnston to dismiss us as not representative of what Denverites want.
I'll end with just a question about one of our sets of plans. Leading up to 2019, we did a comprehensive plan update. So the top level plan for the city and many subordinate plans, Blueprint Denver, game plan for parks, and then mobility plans, including Denver Moves Transit. Denver Moves Transit calls out what your quote from the mayor at the beginning of the presentation said: make it easier to get around by bus, make that mode shift easier, or collaborate with RTD, have buses not stuck in traffic. So that's what that plan called for. It has a network of prioritized bus lanes throughout the city, bus rapid transit or otherwise. But the only thing we really hear from the mayor in interviews these days is kind of bad mouthing the in progress, voter approved East Colfax. And that's disheartening. I was listening to the DOTI advisory board just earlier this week, and one of the advisory board members asked a presenter, do we really believe that that we can look at alternatives that involve buses when it's so clear that this administration is against prioritizing the roads for buses? How does that factor into this? Is it just more of the same where we heard one thing and are getting another?
Yeah, I think it's definitely an example of where he's changing his tune from what he spoke about as a candidate. And I do think it's a real opportunity for us to encourage him to refocus. Part of it is street design changes like the Colfax BRT. And I can empathize with why that makes him nervous because the construction process is super disruptive, right? But once the construction is done, we're going to have this amazing gold standard version of what BRT is. And I think it's an opportunity for us to really celebrate that and clamor for, we like this. How many other corridors can we get it on? But also, push him to make additional improvements to our transit system that don't necessarily require drastic changes to our street design. Things like transit signal priority that allow the buses to get through the intersections faster, or working with RTD to increase frequency on the existing routes. So when the Colfax BRT opens, we can be confident those buses are going to come every 4 minutes as originally promised. And so I think there is some real opportunity to get them to refocus on transit. But again, it's going to take all of us speaking up and asking for that from him.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Jill, and congratulations on this piece of work that got a lot of media attention, which is always helpful.
Yes, and thank you to all of our partners who contributed. It was absolutely a collaborative effort.
Next, we'll turn to Pete Piccolo from Bicycle Colorado. They've also done a study. In this case, it's not evaluating politicians on what they say versus what they do, but showing us all a mirror to actual driver behavior in a very new and interesting way. We see your chat there, Pete.
Hey everyone.
Hi.
You can see my screen.
Yes, it looks like you're about to go into presentation mode here.
Yeah. Just a time check. Are we still looking at? Tell me how much time again, Joel.
30 minutes, including Q&A.
Okay. So I'm going to go through the driver behavior study and pause for questions, and then, if I recall, you asked that I talk about what's happening in the legislature. Do you still want me to cover that?
Yeah, if you have time, it's always great to hear what the priorities you're pushing for are.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for inviting me. My name is Pete. I'm with Bicycle Colorado. I do live in Denver, and I was listening in on the conversation we're having. I see Jill often, and I'm fortunate to be able to talk to her on a regular basis, and I never get tired of hearing her talk about this work that I care so deeply about. I will introduce myself by saying this, as I just was, again, listening in on this conversation and thinking about Denver specifically. I was just thinking if we had the power of magic and just could like erase the transportation system, have a white canvas, and look at the characteristics of Denver, the geographic layout, where people live, population growth. There is no sane person in the world that would create the system we have today. No sane person would create the system we have today. And I think the challenge is we have it, and you need bold leadership to change it because it's entrenched. It is one of the ultimate status quos in society, and we just don't, in my opinion, we just don't have that leadership right now. So what do we do in Denver? That's my introduction, so you know my belief system that I bring to this conversation. Bicycle Colorado is a statewide group. We focus on expanding access to safe biking and walking. We spend most of our time at the state level, increasingly at the local level, but more from leading from behind, kind of building the capacity of local advocates across the state. And I mean, you all know this data on traffic fatalities, and this is a lead into the driver behavior study. You know, what a lot of people don't know is how Colorado stacks up against other states and how we stack up against other developed countries. And so, real briefly, on average, the average fatalities, traffic fatalities per capita per 100,000 people in the US is 12.2. Colorado is in the middle of that bell curve. And when I talk to folks, particularly from other states, Colorado has this image of, kind of an active lifestyle. You should be able to walk and bike, whether it's for recreation or everyday trips, and you think it's safe. Like you think of Florida, I don't know, I think of like Florida and a number of states that's been, we're not that good. And compared to other countries, if you look at the top 30 developed countries, the average fatalities per 100,000 people is 6. We are 12. Canada is 4. UK is 3. Sweden is 2 fatalities. It's crazy. I mean, it's really crazy. And so when we find ourselves in conversations with folks in government, again, not just in Denver, but across the state, we say things which I'm sure you all have heard. It's becoming kind of the common talking points with advocates is, traffic violence is a public health epidemic. It is a public policy failure. It is predictable and preventable. And, despite the data, what we hear too often is, yeah, I think your proposed policy solution is really a solution looking for a problem. Or we'll hear, yeah, but the vast majority of drivers in Colorado are really good. And like to tell them they can't hold their phone when driving, I'm not sure that's good. And we heard that when we were advocating for the hands-free law. And so like the house is burning around us, in my opinion. And there's this like, all is good. And so the last time I heard like, people are great drivers, all is good, it just made us question like, yeah, really? Are they really that good? And I said that to this particular person. And like, we know that, enough of us are not, because you look at the data, the downstream data of crashes, fatalities, injuries. So clearly something upstream is terribly wrong. And it just prompted us to ask, like, let's just take a look at that. And so we are fortunate to find a partner, a startup company. They are an automated traffic enforcement company, but they offered to work with us to create what we think is the largest driver behavior study of its kind in Colorado. So I'm going to walk you through that now. So we visited 26 communities. We did visit Denver, but very little, and I'm happy to explain why. We didn't spend a lot of time in Denver. We visited 26 communities. We visited 196 intersections and conducted 30-minute observations. Now, we didn't purposely target high injury network type intersections. We did look for places where there was enough traffic volume, where there was pedestrian activity, people biking. There was something there to observe. Like we didn't go to a residential street, but we didn't go to the places we know people are getting killed. We observed almost 50,000 vehicles pass through those 196 intersections. And when we were doing that, there were 1,700 bicyclists, 6,000 pedestrians, and we recorded 7,900 traffic violations that spanned running a red light, not obeying a stop sign or a yield sign, speeding, holding an electronic device, or not wearing a seatbelt. And so if you just did simple math and extrapolated these 30-minute observations into a full day, across these 196 intersections, we imputed 200,000 violations. Let me unpack that a little bit for you. So we observed 1.7% of our observations were red light violations. There were 590 red light violations, 18% speeding violations. So there were 2,525 speeding violations, 44.5% or 1,213 stop sign violations. And I'm going to come back to stop sign violations in a minute because I'm grappling with a few things with that. 2.1% yield sign violations, or 1,213 yield sign violations. 2.8% distracted, and 7.7% were not wearing seatbelts. So stop signs are interesting. So we have all the video behind this, by the way. So we used this company's software to analyze every moving object in the frame, from pedestrians to bicyclists to vehicles and so forth. And like, let's be honest, like the type of violation I do think matters. For example, was it a right turn at a stop sign? Were they going straight through? Was it a left turn? How fast were they going? And when you look at the video evidence behind these violations, you see a range of kind of egregious behavior. So somebody pushed back, and I was like, everyone does it. And I really struggle with this because, collectively, overall, you look at this data set, it essentially says most of us have this kind of loose adherence to the law. And, I do wonder whether this loose adherence to the law then manifests in like more egregious behaviors. When we kind of tacitly bless breaking the law, then that is kind of a slippery slope. But a number of these 44.5% violations were really problematic. Like, this wasn't like it was closer to like we're just going through the stop sign than we are like it was a full stop. And so similar for the yield, but this is even more problematic. Let me see if I can blow this up. So this is somebody crossing a flashing beacon. You see the person here starts walking across. The beacon's flashing, and the car just, goes. So you could say like, oh, what's the big deal? I don't know. I think that's a big deal, and you can push back on that if you want, but I think that's a big deal. And as noted here in the lower left, failure to yield at a right of way represents 7.9% of all fatal crashes, according to NHTSA. And then so distracted driving, I do think this 2.8% is low because we're only in intersections. And I mean, this is anecdotal. This is a premise that I'm bringing to like this part of the analysis. If people are going to pay attention, they're most likely to pay attention when driving through an intersection, as opposed to just a long straightaway. And so I do think this is pretty low. By the way, there was quite a bit of variability around these ranges. So like this point here about Boulder, in one intersection in Boulder, we observed 150, there were 150 pedestrians working through an intersection. And in a 30-minute observation, like 1 in 7 were holding their phones while pedestrians were going through the intersection as well. And a lot of folks have admitted in a CDOT survey from a few years back that they do use their phone. So, like, as advocates, as folks who care about safe streets, what do you do about this? And for Bicycle Colorado, like, what's really important is engineering, changing the built environment. I'm sure that is not the first time somebody has said that to you all. There are some challenges with that, like funding and pace of change. I mean, that kind of is the holy grail, in my opinion. Like, if we could just reinvent, redesign the whole physical infrastructure, it'd be great. Education, like, we do education. We think it's important. The impact is difficult to measure. And then we come to enforcement. And so, like, this driver behavior study was not just about enforcement. We have used this, by the way, as an advocacy tool to advocate for, a variety of different solutions, automated enforcement being just one of them. And, for automated enforcement, there was a study a couple of years ago, it was 4 years ago, and I can't remember who did it, but they looked at traffic citations. And this is a proxy, but I think it's a pretty good proxy all across Colorado. And they were down 58% over like a 5-year period. And over that 5-year period, traffic fatalities are going up. So, one could argue, well, citations are going down. People are driving better. They're obeying the law. or they're just going down because we're not enforcing traffic laws. Um, and so we are proponents of automated enforcement, to put all the cards on the table. We're leaning into this more at the local level. We are going to be leaning into it in Denver. Um, well, I was going to go off on Denver again, but I'll hold. So just Colorado has a pretty good legal framework now. 3 bills have been passed over the last 3 years, 23, 24, 25. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. And so let me just give you the quick highlights of the legal framework, and then I'll pause for questions. So outside of school zones, construction zones, adjacent to parks or residential streets, city council has to pass an ordinance designating what's called automated traffic enforcement zones to be able to deploy fully automated traffic enforcement. The law that was passed in 2023 allows this technology to be used in a variety of different ways. So most of us think about speeding and running red lights. That is included, but also disobeying traffic signals like stop signs, yield signs, pedestrian beacons, also unlawfully using bus lanes and bike lanes. And then in 2025, the statute was updated to allow school districts to deploy the technology for stop school buses. So the alarm goes off, people illegally passing school buses, which a learning point for me last year was that too is a big problem. So that is also allowed. A number of school districts, by the way, are doing that. Third point I would like you to know is the statute prevents vendor payments to be tied to ticket revenue. The liability is actually not on the driver, it's on the vehicle owner. There are generous public notifications and warnings. I use generous because, I mean, I think you'd have to be like not paying attention when you're driving to not like see the signage that's required. It is like you're really going out of your way to let people know, there's this camera ahead. There are rigorous data privacy protections, which is not the case yet. There is a bill in the legislature now for flat cameras, like flock cameras, but we baked into statute decent, I think, good data privacy protections. And then there is legislation being debated this year to just tighten statute, because again, it's a little messy after 3 bills in 3 years. It's a little messy. And then they are looking at increasing the fine for speeding. So this fine is currently $40 for speeding. And then there is a really interesting school zone bill, which would allow municipalities to legally designate a safe route to school. And that route would be open for automated enforcement without city council approval. And I'm going to just wrap up. I'll just say there's a bunch of data that says this works. Now in Colorado, we're having evidence that it works across the state. I mean, automated enforcement has been around since the 90s. And I will say in Denver, I mean, forgive me if you all know this, but they announced over a year ago that they would be expanding enforcement. I think it was 6 cameras on Federal and Alameda over a year ago. And now it's just starting to come up in city council discussions. I don't think it's been on the agenda yet, but again, council needs to adopt an ordinance. And so why does it take this long to implement this technology that could be implemented in a week? By the way, there's no upfront cost. Although the vendors can't be paying on ticket revenue, there is no upfront cost for the technology. And if you compare Denver to other cities in Colorado, there are numerous cities now, from rural, suburban, and some urban, that have moved quickly, like Pueblo, which has horrible fatality data. They're the worst per capita in Colorado. They decided enough's enough. And within 3 months, they're going to have 15 cameras. So by this summer, they're going to have 15 cameras on the ground. And here we are in Denver, and it's a year later with 6 cameras. So I'll stop there for questions on the study and anything on automated enforcement.
Yeah, it is a great question. What would Denver be doing if they actually thought it was a crisis? So I'm looking through the questions here. We've got a number of things. Start with Nathan about infrastructure.
More of a comment, really, but I thought that example you showed of the driver rolling through the flashing lights was such a profound example. I remember talking to a councilwoman who said the cost of putting in something like that is hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially, all for something that a driver can just ignore. Wouldn't the money have been better spent putting in, like a raised crosswalk? Or a roundabout at the intersection, or things that drivers can't ignore no matter how distracted they are. Like you have to slow down for a roundabout. So I just wonder if that is. It would be interesting too to see a study done of intersections that have been made safer, and compare and contrast that data with what you recorded.
Yeah, that's a good idea that a few people have shared over the last month or so that we've been talking about this study. I agree. No, I agree. I'm not ready to dismiss that type of infrastructure or intervention, but I get you. I get what you're saying.
Tatiana has a question and comment about what she's hearing from the police.
Hi, Peter. Thank you so much for this study. This was really, really informative, and I appreciate your time. For the enforcement, Nathan had answered my question, just because the chief of police had presented at the Wash Park neighborhood East meeting this week, and he had mentioned that the enforcement, police don't do anything. Nathan mentioned probably because it's expensive. So I understand that. But my other question was, you had mentioned that their speed cameras were supposed to be for Alameda. Do you happen to know where on Alameda those were supposed to be? And I think you mentioned that those were supposed to be, like, those got approved a year ago.
Let me clarify. So you can just Google this, and there was a press release, a media event, and Amy Ford said we are targeting Alameda and Federal, and we are going to be installing, I think it was 6 in those 2 locations to start. So there's been no like approval yet by city council to create the corridor. So again, they have to like create a corridor. Amy did share with me that they're designating the entire high injury network as an automated enforcement like zone, which would open up that geographic footprint to automated enforcement. I do think that's a step in the right direction. There are other areas outside of the network that I think should be considered. And then the question that we're asking, and we are going to come up with an answer to this, is what is the optimal number of cameras? Like why 6? Right? I do think 6 is not enough of the city as a whole. But when I asked, like, what is the vision for automated enforcement within this broader conversation of traffic safety? What do you think the right number is? And we don't have that yet. The city doesn't have that. So that's something that if they're not going to come up with it, we'll provide it.
And sorry, just one more. And you said there's no upfront cost to these cameras. So the only thing hanging up is just DOTI deciding to do it? Do I understand that right? Or
well, there is no upfront cost. If they conduct an RFP and they negotiate, I mean, most vendors are installing the technology, setting up these programs with no upfront cost. There would be a cost to DOTI because it's moving from police to DOTI. So police has the staff and the back end process in place to manage the program, and DOTI is going to have to do that. So I'm not sure where they are with that, but they're going to have to build that back end, and there's probably a cost. I'm assuming there's a cost to that.
I think that's all the questions we have about your study. There is a very nice comment I hope you take time to look at from Carol. Very complimentary. And there is a question from Allison about Morrison. Allison? Allison, you are muted.
Sorry. Sorry, I have multiple screens and my mouse sometimes wants to look elsewhere. So I understand that the speed camera in Morrison on Morrison Road, like in the town of Morrison, was really effective and it slowed people down and or at least made them a ton of money. Why don't we have them at every single intersection? Why don't we have speed cameras on every place where there's a crash? I mean, is it like a safety issue? You said there's no upfront cost. I don't understand what
Yeah.
politically makes people want to drive so fast.
Are you asking why we don't have more cameras, or why do people drive so fast?
Why are people so against other people driving the speed limit? I don't know. I don't understand like the politics of it.
Well, the politics for the cameras have shifted in favor of this technology for a variety of reasons, which we don't have time to get into. And like the vast majority of people, and there's some surveys behind this, survey data behind this, not just Colorado, but for the country, that shows that roughly 80% of the people support the technology. There is a vocal minority, and I'm not sure exactly what happened in Morrison and why they pulled that camera, which is unfortunate. But if it's done well, and we know how to do it well, there is a playbook of best practices. If it's done well, which means it's done fair, it's done equitably, it'll improve safety, and the public will be okay with it. The public will be okay with it. And so I do think we're getting there. And I say that again, based on all the conversations we're having across the state. There are a few law enforcement agencies that are pushing back because they're a little bit old school, to be honest with you, kind of smaller towns who are like, we need to look that driver in the eye and have an officer hand that person a ticket. And that's just the way we've done it. And that is the way we will always do it. So I would just ask you all, I think I'm not making any promises here, but we may do this study, do a little deeper dive in Denver, particularly if DOTI continues to drag their feet, or if the implementation doesn't move beyond like 6 cameras again. I don't know what the right number is, but it's more than 6. And
93 people died. We could put them at those 90 intersections.
Right. So to do a study and get some of this data and use it as an advocacy tool, we may do that.
Okay.
But
let's
I
be
would
sure
just,
you. Yeah.
keep us moving, Joel. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's be sure you have time to give a little update on what you're pushing for in this legislative session at the state.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go through this really quickly. So there's good news and bad news here. So in terms of infrastructure and specifically public funding for infrastructure, over the last 2 years, there have been bills introduced that would have generated more revenue for infrastructure. Those 3 bills died. There are no bills this year to generate funding for infrastructure. And in fact, there was a bill, this one, House Bill 1266, which would have repealed the retail delivery fee. So there is a 29-cent flat fee that's charged to retail deliveries made by motor vehicle to our homes, and that money goes into what's called the Multimodal Options Fund. A big chunk of that money goes towards Safe Streets infrastructure. This bill would have repealed that flat fee. It was introduced due to concerns about cost of living, which are real. The bill died in committee this week, so that's good news. The bad news is signatures are being collected for a ballot measure to do essentially the same thing and more. So redirect a couple of sources of revenue for Safe Streets infrastructure and transit to roads and bridges only. So we're monitoring this along with a number of other advocates to see whether they secure the signatures necessary and whether there'll be a ballot measure fight. We'll know by the end of August whether that'll land on the ballot. So I'm not going to hit on all these because I want to pause again for questions on what's happening at the legislature. So there is a bill that would increase penalties for vehicular homicide and assault. What we have found, and this is about, to be honest with you, I think this is less about changing driver behavior and more about justice, but that's a conversation for another time. And justice is important, of course. So we're finding that far too many of traffic fatalities are being charged as careless driving resulting in death, which is a misdemeanor. So somebody, this is a true example, can be texting, run somebody over, kill them, and they're charged with a misdemeanor. They end up in traffic court. One of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons is when DAs look at the crime and they look at their charging opportunities, what they have in their tool belt, you have a misdemeanor, careless driving resulting in death, and then you jump to a class 4 felony. So there's no 6, which is the lowest felony. Technically there is, but it's a very, very narrow scenario. So, but essentially there's no felony 6, there's no felony 5. And then to prove a felony 4 is a high bar. And so you find DAs defaulting to a misdemeanor 1. So we are working with the felony 5 statute, which is negligent homicide, and expanding it to include vehicular homicide. And then we're including in that moving distracted driving and death from a misdemeanor to a felony 5. There are a couple other provisions on there that increase penalties for felony 4, felony 3, vehicular homicide, but that's the gist of it. There is another bill that does something similar, being proposed by other legislators, which accomplishes something similar. This class 5 felony doesn't do everything in this first bill that I mentioned, but also is lowering punishments for murder with extreme indifference. So this is not part of Bicycle Colorado's work, but we may find ourselves, depending on what happens with the Senate bill that I just shared with you, we may find ourselves working with this bill to try to make progress on vehicular homicide and vehicular assault. Again, spirit of time. So there's a small but mighty bill called Senate Bill 1237, Transportation Safety Modifications. There's a couple of things. To the surprise of many folks, it's actually not against the law to obstruct a bike lane. Now, there are 10 municipalities out of 271 that have adopted a local ordinance that prohibits obstructing a bike lane, but in Colorado statute, it's not against the law to obstruct a bike lane. So this bill would change that. This bill would also remove accident from Colorado law and replace it with crash. So for those of you who are in this advocacy space, you'll know why that's important. This is what we call education through legislation. And so we're trying to make some hay in the public square talking about accident versus crash. And it does a couple of other, this bill does a couple of things with using chains and stalled vehicles in the public right of way. And I'll wrap up with this. There's a ton going on, but I'll just wrap up with this. There's also a really cool school zone bill. So it is, the current statute defaults to the municipality to establish the size of a school zone. And we're seeing that school zones are shrinking. And so, and in some cases, shrinking significantly. And so this would establish a minimum size school zone of 1,000 feet of the school's property boundary. And it will also create a legally defined safe route to school. And within that route, I mentioned this earlier, municipalities can install automated traffic enforcement without a city council resolution. There's also an interesting amendment, which I don't have time to get into, which would further strengthen this bill, but this is the bill that's been introduced thus far. Again, a lot going on. I think, I'm out of time. I would just ask a shameless plug. Jill mentioned this, and she's 100% right. Like, despite everything we're reading in the national news about democracy and the decline of democracy, overall, it's still working pretty good in Colorado, in my assessment, and our voices matter, and showing up matters, whether it's writing your state representative, showing up to testify, showing up at our lobby day on the 18th. But I would ask, the easiest thing to do is just sign up for our action alerts. The link is here. I can pass it along to Joel afterwards so that you are made aware of opportunities to contact your representative to support the state legislation.
And that does sound like a very important thing. Of course, people can't click on the link there for the recording because will be posting this. Can you tell us, is it bicyclecolorado.org and people can sign up for notices or?
Yeah, so if you go to bicyclecollar.org, it should be easy to find, and the driver behavior studies out there. So you can just search driver behavior study and you can dig into that if you wanted to spend more time with that study.
Okay. Yeah, no, it sounds like there might be calls to action to tell our elected officials at the legislature at key moments to support some of these bills. So please sign up for these notices and act because these all sound like really good things. We did not get any additional questions specific to the pending legislation. We do have some important commentary from Rob Topness about why we should fear ballot initiative 175. And I think that's it in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for the invitation, Joel. Appreciate it.
We're going to end this evening as INC. We all live in neighborhoods with one of my neighbors, Josh Pauletic. As I included in the meeting announcement, Josh lives on what should be a quiet side street, but he and his family were seeing a lot of very high speed cut through traffic. Drivers not just going fast, but angry fast, trying to cut in front of other drivers coming off of an arterial and beat a light. And he came, in addition to repeatedly over a number of years writing some very well-crafted emails, he started gathering and including data. And I want everybody to hear about what he did and how we can do likewise. Josh.
Thank you, Joel. Nice to meet everybody here and be sharing this with you guys. I'll jump right in. My name's Josh Pauletic, as Joel's already covered. I'm a resident of Curtis Park. I'm also a board member on the Curtis Park Neighbors RNO. Outside of this data talk we're having here today, I'm a bit of a data nerd too. My vocation is analytics at a local advertising agency called Karshhagen. And I find myself in this traffic advocacy space somewhat reluctantly. I got here because I kind of had to get here through my experiences, and I'll share those with you. So I found Telram, which I'm going to talk more about today, because I live in an urban neighborhood. Curtis Park is adjacent to downtown and Rhino, so we have a fair amount of speeding and people not stopping at stop signs and reckless driving. And on my particular block, which I'll show you in a little bit, we had a lot of cut through traffic happening, and that kind of amplified those behaviors. And for me, I became a parent about 3 years ago, which makes these situations feel a bit different. It got me off the sidelines from, kind of being the raw, that's not cool that you drive that way, to actually trying to do something about it. When you can't get your child in and out of your car safely, you cannot even cross the street safely. It just feels like something's off. And that's when I got involved, and I started reaching out to anybody that I could, from DOTI to city council, police, community resource officer, 311, traffic enforcement, our RNO, and others. I grew a bit frustrated with the responses or lack of response I would receive, or the sort of buck passing that I would experience, where one person would pass me off to somebody else or a different department. And overall, in my experience, I learned that data is a really important component in these conversations, and it's required to keep things moving oftentimes. So, what is Telram? Telram is a smart, easy to use traffic counter. It's leveraging um, uh, great technology that can capture hourly volume, speed, and type of vehicles. It will do all the work for you. It records this information, It stores it, moves it to a database, presents it in a dashboard. It's purpose built to do the thing that I need a traffic counter to do, and I think that many of us would like to have available to us. It's for citizen use, so it doesn't necessarily need to be for traffic engineers or anybody like that. It's privacy safe. It's built in Belgium, interestingly, and you can get it shipped to the United States for about $266, absent tariffs. I'm not quite sure what will happen when tariffs are layered on that. What it requires from the homeowner to make it work is that it needs to be in a second story window, roughly 10 feet off the ground, with a clear line of sight, not too close, not too far, not at an intersection, so somewhere mid-block, and at a perpendicular angle. And you just simply need to plug it in. You don't even need to connect your Wi-Fi. It has a SIM card, uses IoT networks, and transfers its information that way. There are a variety of use cases for TailRam. I'm going to talk about safer streets here today. Definitely encourage you to look into the other use cases yourselves. And what I learned in my experience is that the street safety improvement process kind of has a way that it works, right? There is a person like myself who raises a concern, and they say there's a problem on my block or there's a problem in my neighborhood. And the next step that typically happens is data is collected. So they're not going to just say, Josh is saying it's unsafe here. We're going to change the way the street is engineered. They're going to collect their data. They're going to analyze it, figure out if it's a priority, determine if they want to design solutions, implement those solutions. And if they do, they'll probably measure those later on. Um, the bottleneck where the process usually comes to a halt is in the data collection phase of it. It's pretty expensive to collect data, and the city isn't always willing to spend that data on every request that is out there. So for me, after a while, I kind of learned the game that, hey, I'm stuck on level two. I can't get past this data collection. What can I do to get some data to help, back up my emotional pleas that I'm making to the city? And going out to the internet, you learn that engineering studies are pretty expensive. They're thousands of dollars. At a moment, I was thinking about paying for one, and I said, "Well, that's a bit crazy. That's a lot of money. What if I could just build my own device?" And I got into forums and, kind of got surface level on, can you buy a chip and can you buy this technology and can you write the code and can you build the data pipelines and all that sort of stuff. And I kind of figured out you can do that. And then luckily, I found Telram, and Telram was basically all of that purposely built, already done, affordable, and it works. And they've built all the data infrastructure for you. So, thankfully, I found that. Thankfully, it does exist. Thankfully, there are people that built this product. It's a really neat product. Um, some of the neat things about it, even when you compare it to traditional engineering studies like the tubes you see in streets is that you can get it up and going really quick. If you have one of these, it takes 15 minutes and you're up and going and you're collecting data. It continually collects data. So traffic studies are usually out for a couple days or maybe a week. You can collect data for days and weeks and months, and you can see the trends and how they change. If you do a traffic study, it just kind of matters what happens in that snapshot of time when they log the data, and that's what you go with and make decisions off of. Um, Maintenance is low, and it gives you a really rich picture of what's going on in your situation. So my experience specifically, if you get oriented with this map, you'll get an idea of where I live and the situation and the context that Joel was sharing. So, MLK comes from the east side of Denver. It's a two-lane road on which people drive very quickly. And at Downing, they get throttled down to one lane. And what happens oftentimes is that stoplight backs up. And so people or their Waze apps are directing themselves to instead go south on Downing Street, drive onto a little slip lane, get onto a local street, race through it, and then get back onto the collector street that they were on originally. And these people, as Joel has mentioned, are not the folks who are stopping at stop signs, stopping behind the crosswalk, or obeying traffic laws. They're driving very aggressively. So we had a lot of this going on. It just felt really dangerous on our block. So, when I got started, I would speak to whoever would listen to me, and I was pretty emotional about it. I would say, our block feels dangerous. There are a lot of cars driving through. I'm not happy. Will you help me? And while nobody really told me no directly, they kind of told me no in a variety of ways by passing me off to somebody else, or whatever it might have been. So I kind of hit a roadblock. And in this kind of model of enacting change, I got stuck on level two. So I'd share my concerns. It didn't feel like I had a receptive audience on the other side. The the city would not conduct the traffic studies I wanted them to conduct. So I was kind of stuck, and there wasn't really much I could do. And I found Telram, thankfully. I bought one. I logged 2 weeks of data, and then I shared the findings with DOTI and City Council another time. Said it a little bit more rationally, a little bit more factually. I have 200 cars that are cutting through this slip lane every single day. 20% of those vehicles are heavy vehicles. They're box trucks, they're dump trucks, they have trailers. They're big vehicles that shouldn't be on this roadway to begin with. And honestly, zero of these cars should be doing this shortcut maneuver. Will you help us? And at that point, we got a better response. So I'm vastly simplifying the occurrences, but that's really essentially what happened in essence. Is we came with data, and at that point, the conversation really started to shift. So armed with data, we were taken more seriously. It took a while. It took about a year, but a solution was designed and implemented to close the slip lane, and our situation has improved remarkably as a result of it. So the point I'm trying to make is that data helps, and if the city is unwilling to collect data, you can conduct your own little traffic study. And even if you're curious about the traffic patterns that are happening on your block or in your neighborhood, it's really interesting to see for those of us who are into data and patterns and kind of seeing what's going on. Um, it's not just me. I think this is really kind of a wider thing. So here's another example from San Francisco. It seems like they had a slow street implementation, feels similar to our neighborhood bikeways. They wanted to reduce the number of vehicles and the speeds on those streets. And after implementing this, people felt like it wasn't working as well as it should. So they bought Telram devices, they measured the speeds and the volumes, and long story short, they were able, with that data, to get the city to do further changes to improve the situation. I'll walk you through a few more details and then pause for questions, and then we can hop into a live demo of the dashboard so you can see what the data actually looks like and see what the product does. So first, I just want to note that there's a thing called Telram Networks, and this is more geared for the DOTIs of the world or the organizations, and I encourage you to look it up. It's essentially a number of Telram devices pooled together and their data pooled together, and it can help with broader studies or a variety of things. As a data person, I love the fact that you can get raw data from Telram, even with a free subscription. And I should say that $266, you pay that. And from that point forward, you don't need to pay anything else. You retain your access to the device that continues collecting data. You can move it around if you want to, and you won't pay anything in the future unless you want to upgrade to an advanced subscription. And you don't really need to do that for any kind of logical reasons, unless you're really trying to get advanced with this. But you do have access to raw data. It's a really nice thing. There is one limitation, and the sensors, once the sun sets, switch from being able to count or measure speed to only count the number of vehicles or number of things passing by it. So it loses its ability to say this is a large truck or this is a pedestrian, but it still retains its ability to count in nighttime hours. And then one really nice thing it does is it calculates V85 for you. And V85 is the term that traffic engineers use if you're not familiar with it. So it puts it in a traffic engineer's vernacular so you can speak to them in their language. And it's basically saying that 85% of drivers are not going to exceed the speed. So if your speed limit's 25 and the V85 is 35, that's probably going to be looking like a problem to a traffic engineer, and they're going to say people are driving too fast. Pause and see if there are any questions. If not, I can get into some of the data.
I haven't seen any questions yet. There's been cheers for getting rid of neighborhood slip lanes and questions about, really this is a government role that you're taking on yourself because they don't have the capacity to do this and they do it in a very expensive way. And then an idea about maybe libraries could have these and check them out. I think we're ready for the demo.
Okay, great. You can still see the map?
Yes.
Okay, great. So each of the dots are going to show a live TelRAM device. And if I zoom out, really neat thing is it's showing where is the sunset in the world, where is the sun shining. You can see how many devices there are deployed throughout Europe. You can see there's one down here in Brazil. Another one looks like maybe in Argentina. And when you connect, and certainly when you connect with a free subscription, your data just automatically finds its way into this map and you can go and look at it. So my data right now is just pointed at my alley. It's kind of boring information. I'm measuring cut through traffic in my alley. So I'm going to go to a sensor that's in Boulder. And I don't know whose this is, but let's look at it and let's see what they have going on. First thing I'm going to do is try to understand what is the nature of their street. And it tells me they have a 20 mile per hour speed limit. We can look on a map that A is on this side, B is on the other side. It looks to be a residential street, Pine Street. And then we can go over to the data and see what it's telling us. So it's producing a 2 week window. We have European date formats, but if you can get past that, you're good to go. It's breaking it down into the different modal categories. So pedestrian, two-wheelers, cars, heavy vehicles, and night. If you pay for a subscription, it'll break it down into 10 categories. And here we have a view of daily traffic counts. We can use a neat feature to suppress certain pieces of this. So if we only want to look at cars and heavy vehicles and night, which, again, after the sun sets, everything turns into this night metric. Here's what we have. And we can just see with our eyes, the rough average is around 200, 250 vehicles a day. That's their average traffic flow. This is a breakout by hour. So again, I'm going to want to suppress pedestrians. Just these guys have a lot of pedestrians. Look how much. 16% of their traffic are pedestrians. We can suppress that and we can start to see when the spikes happen. So here's a spike at 9 a.m. and you can start to understand the patterns. And when we had this pointed at our street, it was really interesting to validate what you feel and what you think is going on with real data, and sometimes even get corrected from your assumptions. Here's another chart. I find this one a little bit hard to read, but it's there. I'm sure somebody knows how to use it. These are very helpful. This puts speed into buckets. So we can see, and we have it in miles per hour. They've converted it, thankfully. We have some people, or one person maybe, that has somehow broken 43 miles an hour on this little stretch. Good for them. Other people are, you can see what the speeds are. Here's our V85 measurement. So we saw before the average or the speed limit is 20 miles per hour. So what I've experienced is traffic engineers seem to have a tolerance of 4 or 5 miles per hour, and they don't seem to worry about that too much. But if it's pushing up here and it's 30 miles per hour and the speed limit's 20, it's kind of a problem. And what we see are people are speeding on the commuting hours. We have people speeding at 8 a.m. and people speeding at 5, 6, and 7 p.m. You can also see the directional flow. So again, we had A to B, B to A. It's a little bit hard to look at, but if one thing I found is easy that helps is to just kind of X out one of the directions and get the other direction showing. I'm going to take the pedestrians out too. Here's what the vehicles look like essentially in their traffic flow in that direction from A to B. And then again, the modal split. And the last thing I'll show you is if you do pay for an advanced subscription, there are some additional features you get. Let's see, I think these guys have one. So essentially, you can get every 15-minute data quartiles, hour quartiles. And so you can really drill into the details, and there are other things you can get if you pay for a subscription, but that's kind of the short and long of it. And that was my experience.
Okay, we'll see if we have some questions here. I'll start. You said it's privacy forward, it's privacy protecting. Do you ever get pictures out of it? Is it a camera that shows pictures you can see?
No, you cannot get pictures out of it. The chip is using a wide angle lens. It's not really snapping pictures that are visible of people. It's translating that information into numeric counts. And then before it sends that information on to the database, it's not sending the images or any of the imagery. It's just sending the counts that it gathers from that lens.
Okay. Tatiana is following up on placement. Tatiana?
Hi, I was looking at this on the website because I'm really interested in purchasing it for Alameda. But we have a one-story house, and our front window is blocked by a tree. I was looking, they've got like outdoor ones, but it doesn't specifically have to be second story top window type thing, right? Did you know?
It technically does, but let me tell you my experience. I've used mine in my first story, as we call it here in America, our first first level. The one I have on my alley right now is probably about 7 feet off the ground, and it's way closer than it should be. It should not be working like it does, but it does work quite well in that location, despite not following the guidelines of being as high up or as far back as it should be. Mine is still working for me in that situation. I'm not using that particular use case as scientifically to talk to anybody and say these are the results. I just want to get a general idea, and it does seem to track very accurately from what we experience as people. So you noted there is an outdoor option. They don't really sell it in the United States. The thing you're missing is the power. And so if you can get power to this device, there are little sort of enclosures you can buy, and there is a forum on the Telram website if you go into it, and you can see how people have adapted these to be outside devices. Some people are using solar panels, some people are using batteries, and some people are running cords or whatever they're doing. But the main thing you probably do need to do is protect it from the weather. And beyond that, if you can figure out a way to get it low voltage power, which is all it needs, you could put it in a different location.
And yours is inside on your window?
Mine is inside. And when I was measuring on my block, I've leaned on neighbors. So my home also is blocked by trees in the front. So I've not been able to point it out of my front window either. But I've had kind neighbors who have allowed me to put it in their second story window and use their home as a host.
Neighbors supporting neighbors. David's got a question.
Yeah, can this be
Yeah,
directed
yeah,
specifically?
yeah. Is it possible to actually aim this at a specific lane, or in fact, could we use this to get bicycles and scooters riding on sidewalks versus on bike lanes,
It's a no,
adjacent bike lanes?
that's a noble cause. I'm not sure that it would work for that use case. It it's more designed to get the full perspective, and you would potentially be able to count the number of two-wheelers that are going in a certain direction, but isolating those to a certain sidewalk. There is a thing you do when you set this up. You have the ability to kind of focus where do you want the main vision of the camera to be. So you could kind of hack it in a little way to aim it in your favorable direction, but more than likely it would be challenged to produce that information.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Any other questions? Just got a couple minutes left. Well, thank you so much for presenting tonight, Josh. I'm happy that you're my neighbor and you're partnering with other neighbors. And one of the things Josh is talking about with the Curtis Park Neighbors Board right now is who would like to use this device next? Move it on to Stout Street where we've got a lot of speeding. Who's got that upper story downward looking view on Stout? And I can see a role for RNOs and other advocacy groups to pool some resources. So thank you for being here. Congratulations on some success, and I think you're going to help more people change their relationship with advocacy. I've seen some people screenshot your "Would you help me with this?" No, little clip already. So let's help people get past that. Well, thanks very much, everyone. We've come to the end of our INC Transportation Committee meeting for March. We meet every other month, the odd-numbered months, second Thursday of the month on Thursday, of course, from 6 to 8 p.m. Please send your ideas for topics you'd like to bring to the INC Transportation Committee, and we'll see you next time.